Mirëmëngjes. Nderuar zoti Pagano, të nderuar miq, koleg dhe përfaqësues të mediave. Është kënaqësi për mua të lançoj prezantimin e sotëm, të titulluar Ngadalësimi i produktivitetit dhe hipoteza e stagnacionit shekullor. Produktiviteti dhe roli i tij në rritjen ekonomike është një temë diskutimi të cilën kriza e fundit botërore e solli me forcë në vëmendjen e studiuesve dhe të vendimarrësve të ekonomisë. Kozgjatja, intensiteti dhe kompleksiteti i kësaj krize ishin të paprecedent në dekadat e fundit. Ekonomia botërore pësoi episodin më të gjatë dhe më të thellë të ngadalësimit dhe rënies ekonomike që pas depresionit të madh të viteve 30. Kjo ishte padyshim një dramë e madhe ekonomike në nivel ekonomish kombëtare, por dhe në nivel biznesesh e familjesh individuale. Megjithatë, kriza shërbeu si katalizator i rivlerësimit të ideve ekonomike dhe si laborator i madh i testimit të tyre. Literatura ekonomike ka një gamë të gjerë studimesh që trajtojnë në mënyrë të detajuar sfidat me të cilat u përballen ekonomitë të ndryshme. Kësaj morie i është shtuar së fundi edhe një publikim i titulluar Makroekonomiksi ndërkombëtar në fondin e krizës financiare botërore. Ky studim përmbledh studimet e ekonomistëve të Bankës së Francës, Bankës Italisë dhe Bankës së Spanjës, të fokusuara në temat kryesore të diskutimit për periudhën e pas krizës. Nëpërmjet hulumtimit sistematik të problemeve strukturore të ekonomisë dhe më konkretisht të ndërlidhjes midis progresit teknologjik, produktivitetit, globalizimit dhe rritjes potenciale, problemeve që hasi tregtia botërore dhe nxitja e konsumit dhe investimeve, problemeve me të cilat u përball dhe vijon përballet politika monetare, si pasojë e rritjes së pasigurisë, rritjes së normave natyrore të interesit dhe inflacionit kronikisht të ulët, dhe ndërvarësisë në rritjet ekonomive botërore, si pasojë e integrimit financiar dhe rolit që kanë flukset financiare dhe normat e interesit në ekonomitë e vogla dhe në zhvillim, autorët e këtij studimi afrojnë një kontribut të çmuar në debatin profesional që ekziston në këtë fushë. Sot jemi me fat të kemi mes nesh një prej autorëve të këtij publikimi, zotin Patrizio Pagano. Zoti Pagano vjen në këtë eveniment me një cilësi të dyfishtë. Së pari, zoti Pagano vjen si drejtor ekzekutiv në Bankën Botërore për Shqipërinë, Italinë, Greqinë, Portugalinë, Maltën, San Marino dhe Timorin Lindor. Së dyti, zoti Pagano vjen si një akademik me një histori të gjatë publikimesh shkencore për periudhën e punës si drejtori i divizionit të ekonomive të avancuara dhe financës ndërkombëtare në Bankën e Italisë, si dhe gjatë një bashkëpunimi të gjatë me institucione prestigjioze të dijes, si Universiteti Bocconit në Itali dhe Universiteti Berkeley i Kalifornisë. Sikundër e theksova dhe më parë, tema e tij e prezantimit do të jetë me rolin që ka produktiviteti në rritjen ekonomike dhe në veçantë mbi debatin që ka ngjallur së fundi hipoteza se ekonomitë e zhvilluara janë të destinuara për një periudhë të gjatë, e pse jo edhe dekadash, rritje të ngadaltë ekonomike dhe frenimit të përmirësimit të mirëqenies. Pa dashur të paraprit gjetjet e prezantimit, më duhet të theksoj se ndjehemi inkurajuar nga konkluzioni i studimit se kjo hipotezë ka të ngjarë të mos jetë e vërtetë. Produktiviteti dhe roli i tij në rritjen ekonomike ka qenë dhe është një temë e cila ka pasur vëmendje të madhe edhe nga studimet e Bankës së Shqipërisë. Studimet tona sugjerojnë se përtej rënies ciklike të kërkesës agregate, ngadalësimi ekonomik në Shqipëri në periudhën pas krizës ka patur një element të fortë strukturor. Me fjalë të tjera, përgjysmimi i ritmeve të rritjes për periudhën para dhe gjatë krizës pasqyron si ngadalësimin e zgjerimit të kërkesës për mallra dhe shërbime, ashtu dhe ngadalësimin e kapacitetit ekonomisë për të afruar këto produkte. Në veçanti, studimet tona kanë gjetur se shkalla e zgjerimit të produktivitetit në ekonominë shqiptare i përcaktuar gjërësisht si aftësia e ekonomisë për të shfrytzuar punën dhe kapitalin fizik për gjenerimin e prodhimit, është përgjysmuar në këtë periudhë nga niveli 2% në nivelin 1%. Për këtë arsye, rritja e produktivitetit ka qenë dhe duhet mbetet një udhërrëfyes për agjendën e reformave strukturore në vend. Në këtë kontekst, konkluzioni i prezantimit të sotëm se normat e ulta aktuale të rritjes së produktivitetit në rang botror nuk përfaqësojnë detyrimisht një normale të ekonomisë, është një inkurajim në tej për suksesin e reformave në Shqipëri. Lejoni ta shtjelloj shkurtimisht më tej këtë argument. Së pari, ekonomia shqiptare ka qenë dhe është në një proces ristrukturimit të modelit të rritjes së saj. Ndër të tjera, ky proces parashikon një mbështetje më të madhe të rritjes në sektorët e orientuar drejt eksportit, si industria dhe turizmi, si edhe një orientim më të madh të resurseve financiare drejt sqarimit të investimeve. Zhvendosja e burimeve financiare, njerëzore dhe menaxheriale midis sektorëve të ekonomisë kërkon kohë dhe shoqërohet me ngadalësim të përkohshëm të prodhimit. Megjithatë, ribalancimi i burimeve të rritjes nga ndërtimi e tregtia drejt industrisë dhe shërbimeve të eksportit është një proces i cili tashmë ka nisur. Kjo zhvendosje graduale vjet re edhe në ribalancimin simetrik të portofolit të kredisë bankare. Së dyti, niveli dhe shpejtësia e zgjerimit të produktivitetit ka një lidhje të drejtë me shkallën e edukimit dhe të kualifikimit të fuqisë punëtore. Reforma e sistemit të lartë arsimor dhe rritja e theksit në arsimin profesional janë dimensione esenciale në ristrukturimin e ekonomisë, frytet e së cilave do të bëhen gjithmonë më të dukshme në afatgjatë. Megjithatë, Shqipëria ka ende punë për të bërë në këtë drejtim, në veçanti drejt frenimit e migrimit të fuqisë së kualifikuar punëtore dhe të rifreskimit të aftësive të fuqisë së saj punëtore nga sektori privat. Së treti, produktiviteti është i lidhur ngushtë me përmirësimin e aftësive menaxheriale të biznesit. Fushata për rritjen e formalizimit, rritja graduale e konkurrencës, si dhe rishikimi i ligjit për falimentin do të krijonin stimuj të duhur në këtë drejtim. Në veçanti, jam i bindur se përmirësimet ligjore dhe nënligjore të bëra në drejtim të respektimit të kontratës së kredisë bankare do të ndihmojnë jo thjesht vetëm shëndetin e bankave, por do të stimulojnë edhe rritjen e disiplinës e të efektivitetit në përdorimin e fondeve nga bizneset shqiptare. Së fundi dëshiroj të theksoj se në ndryshim nga ekonomitë e zhvilluara, të cilat ndodhen në kufirin teknologjik dhe të cilat për këtë arsye e shohin progresin të lidhur me aftësinë e tyre për inovacion, Shqipëria ka hapësira më të mëdha zhvillimi nëpërmjet adoptimit të teknologjive dhe praktikave ekzistuese. Në këtë prizëm, detyra jonë mbetet të zgjedhim dhe të zbatojmë modelet e promovuara të zhvillimit. Duke u bazuar në sa më sipër, jam i bindur se Shqipëria ka të gjitha premisat për rritjen e produktivitetit dhe në këtë mënyrë për përshpejtimin e ritmit të rritjes ekonomike dhe rritjes së mirëqenies. Ajo që tashmë duhet është një konsensus mbi vizionin e zhvillimit të vendit dhe një vullnet i gjithanshëm i zbatimit të tij. Të nderuar pjesëmarrës, jam i bindur se prezantimin vijim do të pasurojë më tej debatin ton mbi këtë çështje. Pa humbur kohë dhe pa u zgjatur më tej, do të dëshiroja të lija fjalën zotit Pagano në prezantimin e tij interesant. Faleminderit. Zoti Pagano, ju lutem.
So thank you very much, Governor. And it's always a pleasure to be here. And I must say that even though I represent Albania, I must speak in English because I am not fluent.
I just spoke in Albanian because of the media, but of course the presentation will be in English and everybody speaks fluent English here.
So thank you. And thank you for this very kind invitation. And it's also a pleasure for me here in the central bank, having spent 20 years in the research department of the Bank of Italy. It's really something that I miss. So as you rightly said, the paper I'm going to present today is a part of a book that together with other colleagues from other central banks, European central banks, we wrote to focus on international macroeconomics in the aftermath of the financial crisis. And the chapter that I wrote with Massimo Sbragia, a colleague of mine at the Bank of Italy, focuses on say, the global context, which is this idea that major economies may be undergoing a moment of long stagnation that may be secular stagnation, in the words of Larry Summers, who, the former Secretary of the Treasury, the American Secretary of Treasury that started this discussion. So what we try to do in this paper is to re-examine the various theories that deal with this hypothesis and try to find some support or not to this idea. I must say that, as a usual disclaimer, when we present papers like this, the opinion expressed here are my own and not those of the institution I'm affiliated with. So, let's move it. Let's move. Okay. So, the idea of secular stagnation was put forward by Larry Summers a few years back. And to be clear, this is like an ink block test. An ink block test is when they show you a picture and everybody sees something different. So the secular stagnation also means different things to different people. The two major, say, interpretations are one more associated with problems on the demand side, and the other with issues on the supply side. The demand side is really the original interpretation of Summers. Summers started from the point of view that the natural interest rate, as the governor was alluding to, is in some major economies, in particular in the US, may have gone to a very low level, possibly negative level. This means that even if the central banks puts its own interest rate, the policy rate, to zero, that will be too high for the economic condition. And therefore, this is why he was advocating a big fiscal stimulus, which in part the Obama administration he was part of undertook. Very recently, last few weeks, there was a very heated debate between Summer himself and Joe Stiglitz on the merit of these expansionary fiscal policies with respect to the current expansionary fiscal policy that the current US administration is undertaking. So this debate is very alive and kicking. In Summers' words, without this strong expansion, there is a very high risk that the US economy may go into a period of very, very long slow growth or stagnation at all. On the other hand, other authors examine the same question focusing on the supply side, therefore focusing on the main determinants of growth, in particular of productivity. And the most prominent of these authors is Bob Gordon, who is Chicago University. And Gordon's idea mainly is based on the fact that the major innovation related to the ICT revolution are already have peaked. And now there are no major breakthroughs. There is just an expansion of consumer goods related to ICT, but not major breakthrough that really change the way economies function. Then there are also other interpretation of the secular stagnation. I'm not quoting here. One, for instance, is associated with Roger Farmer, who says that the role of expectation is also crucial. Say asset prices may be say below their normal value, and so the role of policy is to restore asset prices. In general, to avoid crisis, policy has to manage to avoid the boom and bust in asset prices, to say limit this possibility of stagnation afterwards. So what we do in this paper, we focus more on the supply side, not because we don't see merit in the demand side interpretation, but because we want to tackle from the supply side in order to understand whether the main determinants of economic growth, so what explain economic, what can be say, how can be economic growth in the US can be decomposed first, and then what we could expect for the future. And in particular, we will focus on the slow growth of total factor productivity, which, as I will say in a bit, is the main determinants. And in the slowdown of, say, the labor component, that is the reduction of hour works and the stabilization of labor force participation. Of course, an important thing is also the contribution of human capital, and we examine the behavior of the average years of schooling. So, what I'm saying is of course, focus on the US economy, because we see it as the technology frontier. As the governor said, this has important implication also for developing countries. First of all, because economies are very interconnected, and therefore there are important spillovers from major economies to developing ones. On the other hand, it's important to understand so what major economies are doing to understand, say, the scope for catching up that developing countries have. As will be clear in a bit, various components of economic growth can have, say, different implications for advanced and developing countries. So I already said what how this presentation will be done. So let's go to the numbers. And I'm here on my main conclusion if someone falls asleep. So I'm presenting the conclusion immediately. So there is the average US economic growth in the post-war era before the financial crisis was 2.2% in per capita terms. So we show that 0.5 of these 2.2 percentage points can be attributed to what we call transitory factors. All the rest is total factor productivity growth. What is total factor productivity? Is the way we combine inputs. And so in order to understand whether future economic growth is going, it's very important to understand whether this component of the economic growth is going. And this is very difficult. So no one has a crystal ball and can say total factor productivity will halve or double. This is the most difficult thing to forecast. What we do is to just look at past experience to read the current debate in the light of past experience. So the decomposition. And here, I mean, if there are questions, you can interrupt me anytime. There is no problem. If there is a clarification or burning question, I have no problem in answering immediately. So the way we approach this problem is to start with a production function, normal things that economies do. So output of an economy is the combination of physical capital, K, human capital, H, and a factor that relates to how those inputs are combined. Total factor productivity, A. Of course, human capital is a combination of, say, brute labor force, number of employees, times the average human capital they have, small h. And the average human capital, in turn, is a function of skill or experience. So these are things that somehow we try to measure. So starting from this standard production function, which has constant returns to scale to be a little bit more formal, we can transform it in per capita terms. So we divide everything by P, which is the population. And so rearranging the terms, this output per capita can be seen as a function of, again, productivity, L over P, which is the participation of people to the labor force, and the capital out ratio, K over Y, it is how capital intensive is an economy, and small h, which is the average human capital of the economy. So that said, this is a level, so a level of output per capita. We can say transform it in growth rates, and these are the equation with small letters with the dot on it, which means growth rate. So the growth rate of per capita output, which was 2.2%, as I said before, can be decomposed in these four things. So jumping on the first term, we go directly to the second one. So small e, the growth of small e. So the growth of the participation of the labor force in the past, so in 60 years of US economic growth, this contributed to 0.1 percentage points. So very, 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 very little. The capital intensity of US growth, so the capital output ratio, remained substantially constant. So that means that capital, physical capital in the US grew as fast as output. So K over Y didn't grow much, so the contribution is zero. Human capital per worker, the average human capital contributed to 0.4 percentage point. So these three factors together, say, can explain 0.5 out of 2.2 percentage points of economic growth. As I will show in a bit, so these three things are not expected to contribute more in the future, and I will say why. All the rest is productivity. That is the way we combine those inputs. So the way the economy is organized. This explains the bulk of economic growth in the past 60 years, and that's why I think it's very important to understand what this variable will be doing in the future. Okay, let's look at the pieces one by one. So human capital, average human capital per person. As you see, the average years of schooling, a normal measure of human capital in the US, has been, say, rapidly increasing after the Second World War, but now seems to have peaked. Why? Because normally people don't go to school for more than a certain number of years. And of course, this is probably not a very satisfactory measure of human capital because it's not only the years of schooling that matter, it's also the quality of education that you are getting. And here I open a parenthesis. The World Bank is going to launch a very big project at the next annual meeting that will be held in Bali, Indonesia, in which it concentrates exactly on the measurement of human capital in all the countries in the world, both advanced and emerging, because this is one of the most important determinants of growth of an economy. And will focus not only on years of schooling, but also on the quality of schooling as measured by standard tests. but also on the contribution of other factors that are important determinants of human capital, like nutrition for the small kids and health of the whole population. So this is just to advertise something that the World Bank is currently doing. So again, going back to my slide, human capital possibly has reached a plateau. So we will. It's very difficult to expect for the U.S. an increase in the number of education, a number of schooling per capita, and also if one looks at the high school completion rates, they are more or less in a steady state. So it's not from this variable that growth will come. Let's go to the capital intensity. So the capital output ratio, according to the OECD in the US, will likely remain constant. Therefore, we shouldn't expect much contribution also from this variable. And if one look at investment rate, that are the way that capital output changes, so after the financial crisis, they declined dramatically. And now they started to recover, but the current level, if you see at, say, at the end of the curve, at the end of this slide, is still below the average of the previous year. So investment recovered, but not as much as in the past, and therefore it's very difficult to expect that there will be a very large contribution of physical capital investment to U.S. growth in the future years. And participation rate. So this was an important part of the increase in the increase of the labor force especially after the Second World War was substantial and was driven in particular by the participation of women to the labor force. So while male participation rate remained roughly constant, the increase in the overall U.S. Labor force participation, that is one also of the determinants of growth, was mainly driven by that of women. But also this variable here, as you can see, probably has reached, has peaked. And actually with the retirement of the baby boom generation, is more likely that the overall participation may decline rather than increase, because the population is aging, and therefore the number of employees over the total population is more likely to go down rather than go up. So even this variable will not contribute much to growth. So what's missing? TFP, the productivity part. So, and here there are, say, different expectations to what is likely to happen. Even though most of these different, say, opinions converge to a number that is lower than we observed in the past. The OECD sees TFP remaining roughly constant until 2030, but then declining to 1.1%. That is about half percentage points lower than we have now. Gordon, as I said before, thinks that this decline will happen sooner rather than later because of all those things that related to the diffusion of ICT that I mentioned before. Another important contribution to understanding how TFP will behave comes from a paper, various papers by Chad Jones and colleagues. So he shows that TFP depends on two things fundamentally: the intensity of research and development and the number of researchers that engage in this activity. So the intensity of R&D is, can explain roughly 1/3 of the growth of TFP, and the rest is this, can be attributed to the growth of the number of scientists. Now, the number of scientists that can advance the technology frontier is quite an elusive concept, because so far we say focus on science in the US, or at most in the other advanced economies. We say larger integration of developing countries in the global economy is not clear whether also those economies can contribute to the growth of research and therefore of productivity. Think of, say, the number of Chinese or Indian scientists coming into play. So the more these are integrated into global research, the more likely is that they will, say, help in expanding the technology frontier. So again, this is something which is very debatable, so we don't know what will happen, but at least we see some possibility there, that the increasing number of scientists may contribute to the increase of productivity through the, say, this size effect. R&D intensity, or we don't know whether it has peaked or not. It may also increase, and therefore that's maybe another channel through which this, say, prediction of slowing productivity could, in theory, be defeated. Another thing that we do in the second part of this paper is to examine this prediction of, say, this doom scenario of stagnation and slowing productivity in the light of past experience. And one thing that we found out is that the idea of say, secular stagnation is somehow a cyclical one. So after all the major crisis or recession, there was someone who started saying that that was the most likely scenario going forward. And we start exactly with Albin Hansen, who was the guy who coined the term secular stagnation in the late 30s. As you can see, we did, this is say, a number of mention of the term secular stagnation. We did a Google search and in the books published in each year. And you see that there is some cyclicality there. So there is a peak of the mentions of secular stagnation after the crisis of the 30s, when Albin Hansen coined the term, but also after the Korean War in the early 50s in the US. So, and also, say, in the most recent periods, there is some, there are some cyclical swings in the mention of this this term. What Albin Hansen was worried about is that the recovery that the U.S. economic growth was undertaking in the 30s was only a consumption recovery. So people were buying things, but there was not enough investment. Therefore, he saw this as a problem for future productivity. But one error that we think he did, that he didn't understand the potential of the existing technology. So he thought that automobiles were like something that were not going to have a very important future, and communication thing, they had the radio, but there was enough. There was no future also for different communication. While television was already present, and so he didn't see the all the innovations and productivity improvement that came with the diffusion of automobiles to the whole population, and also the diffusion of communication and technology associated with TV. And those were technologies that were already existing when Alvin Hansen was talking about secular stagnation. Here again, the analogy. When people today talk about the possibility of secular stagnation, maybe they don't see what we will be able to do with the current technology that we already have. So, in fact, as we show, the electrification of the America was the main development of the early 20th centuries, and in the following decades, there was an increasing diffusion of goods stimulated by the diffusion of electricity, consumer goods, appliances, and other applications that contributed a lot to expand the technology frontier. So that's why we tend to conclude that maybe there is too much pessimism to what ICT will be able to do now. Well, when Gordon says it's only a diffusion to consumer goods, maybe too pessimistic, and in fact, people are start talking about the important things that say we will be able to do thanks to artificial intelligence or quantum computing. I have been lucky to visit the IBM labs in Westchester, New York, where they have Watson, this supercomputer, and where they are experimenting with the new quantum computer. So one thing that this technology will allow to do is, say, in very, very short time, combine, different molecules to understand the potential of different medicines. So imagine only this type of, breakthrough that we can have thanks only to, say, the expansion of computational power to research. So we conclude by saying that possibly definitely the drop of some factors, the contribution of transitory factors may bring down U.S. economic growth. So it's very difficult to expect, say, a larger contribution from the numbers of years of schooling, the number of years of schooling, or the participation of to the labor force. So with respect to TFP or productivity in general, we simply don't know. And we show that the idea of secular stagnation may be a cyclical one associated with, say, the very slow recovery that we had after the financial crisis, and there are important papers that show that the recovery after the financial crisis are much slower and less pronounced than the recoveries that come after, say, normal slowdowns or other type of business cycles. In a few years, maybe we will not be talking about secular stagnation anymore. And the similarities between the diffusion of electricity and all the related, innovations like in communication and also car production with ICT today are also remarkable and may lead us to conclude that we shouldn't repeat the same mistake that Alvin Hansen and others did in the past, and therefore undervalue the potential of ICT. So let me also conclude with a slide with for future research. From a modeling point of view, this is, an important but also difficult things to tackle. How to model the evolution of productivity for those also here in the bank that are engaged in modeling is particularly problematic. Micro studies show that the way productivity can be modeled, and there is evidence about that with a Pareto distribution to be technical, use a statistical term, means that technology may have what statisticians call a fractal quality. That is that it may not depend from the current level. Therefore, it means that it can have breakthroughs anytime. And so this is one important modeling question that I think is important to sort out in order to have models that more accurately allow us to make prediction about future economic growth. The second point, as I was mentioning before, is that if we are going to have larger integration of countries, and we know that recently some forces are maybe pushing countries apart, but if there is an integration of emerging economies into the global economy, it may well be that researchers coming from emerging economies may contribute to expand the technology frontier and therefore contribute to the global economic growth, not only in their own countries, but also at the global level. And finally, there are different ways for the human capital, which is also a very important element of economic growth to contribute to future growth. Possibly not through an increase in the average years of schooling, which we know is bounded from above. So we cannot keep studying forever, but the quality of education will be very important. And here again, I believe that this project, this measurement project that the World Bank is going to launch is going to be very important, because by properly measuring the average human capital of an economy, the idea is to give to policymakers the right incentives to invest in this variable that, which will definitely contribute to increase the potential growth of an economy in the future. So maybe a few other words, and then I stop, on the implication for, say, this discussion for developing countries. Even if the most pessimistic, say, predictions will be true, this doesn't mean that the emerging economy will necessarily have immediately the same behavior. Why? Because, say, emerging economies, first of all, need to catch up, say, in the capital intensity. Many emerging economies need to, say, build their infrastructure stock. So therefore, they may need to increase their capital output ratio. And this will be a source of growth for a long time. They will definitely need to improve in the participation of minorities to the labor force. Typically, only male of a certain age participate to the labor force. Women are excluded, and also in other countries there are also other type of minorities that are excluded from the participation of the labor force. And this is possibly a very important contribution, not only directly to growth, but also with will contribute to a better productivity, because, say, if abilities are equally distributed across the population, and there are no reason to assume that they are not equally distributed, there is a better matching between, say, jobs and skills. And this is a productivity improvement. And finally, the emerging economies can keep growing even if the advanced economies are slowing, with their improvement in their own human capital, in particular in the quality of human capital they are providing to their own people. And here I very much agree with the governor said, that this is a very important area for investment for all the developing economies. So I will stop here.